Today's session is going to be a bit personal, and I have already complimented you on your Polish T-shirt. Why are you wearing it, Paul?
Well, I'm so proud of the fact that my Polish citizenship was approved. I think it was last week, and it was a long journey, and I treated myself, and I bought a T-shirt that says Polska, which is how you say Poland in Polish.
That looks great, but it's not been an easy journey, and it's taken a long time, and it's been a pretty emotional few years actually. And I know that you and I have kind of kept in touch throughout the journey, as long as you know, as well as the staff, of course, that work with you. But what prompted you to pursue Polish citizenship firstly?
Well, I knew that I wanted to eventually end up moving to Europe. And the process of doing it, shall we say, the standard way of moving there and applying for a visa and then learning the language, and it's a pretty daunting task. And so I knew that my grandfather was born in Poland, and I had found online that there was a potential to be able to be approved for Polish citizenship through descent. So I started interviewing companies for that purpose, and ultimately decided upon Polaron.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us just a little bit more about your family history? Who were they? Where were they from? When did they immigrate?
So, you know, I think that I have a little bit more of a difficult situation in terms of my family, because my family has actually been in the United States for more than a century. They've lived in, you know, here, and they moved around both sides. All of my family came to the United States around 1910. And they're all Polish. I did the research and found out, I thought I was something else, but it turns out I'm 100% Polish. And they came from an area named Galicia, which is now, funny enough, in Ukraine.
Yes.
But when my grandfather became an American citizen, it was part of Poland. Okay.
And you did mention 1910 or that period of time before Poland became independent in 1918. And it's good that you did say that, because a lot of people think that if the family immigrated prior to 1918 or 1920, when the laws were first introduced, you may not qualify. But in your particular case, and again, it's rare, we were able to prove that there were residents of Galicia, the region that your family comes from, and they did not naturalize before 1920. So it was quite a challenging case, but you fell in that sort of very rare circumstance, I guess, where we were able to prove both. So for those of us that are listening and unsure, you know, definitely speak to us to see whether you might be eligible, even if your family left more than 100 years ago. Just going back to your family, you did mention that you thought you were something else, right? Like not Polish. So is that because of where the family originated from, or what were you told as a child of about your origins?
Well, I always was told that my grandfather was Austrian, which actually was true, because when he was born in 1902, that area where he was born was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Yep.
And when they left, it was still Austria, or Austrian Empire. So, and then I pulled the Ellis Island records, and it said that he was from Austria. And then I actually, prior to contacting Polaron, reached out to the Austrian consulate here in Los Angeles area, and they, after asking a series of questions, told me, sorry, you're not Austrian. Maybe you want to look into Polish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the journey itself, from the moment that you contacted us to the moment that you got your citizenship, took a very long time. And I think it's also fair to say that it was quite emotional and quite challenging in terms of, the levels of frustration, because we are, dealing with a foreign bureaucracy. They require certain documents to prove that your ancestors were Polish, and we couldn't find them. That took a long time. But it was kind of like a team effort. You've put so much work at your end into analyzing documentation, finding records, reading between the lines even. Could you tell us a bit more about that part of the process, please?
Well, I did my own research beyond what Polaron did because I wanted to make sure that no stone was left unturned. And so there are websites that actually do document hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Jewish records. And one of the documents that I actually found was an 1890 census from Galicia showing that my great-grandparents were living together in a home, which proved that they were married, because it turns out that in those days, most Jewish people did not get married in a synagogue. I mean, only got married in a synagogue, right, and did not get married at City Hall or with any license. So there were no records of their marriage, which was one of the documents necessary to prove my Polish citizenship. Right.
And that proof of residence and the fact that they were listed as a married couple really solved your case. And that is, again, for those that are watching and might be in that particular situation where the family left before 1918, 1920. It is to do with the former Polish territories or today's Polish territories. You do have to prove that your ancestors, in Paul's case, his great-grandparents, in fact, your great-grandfather, because in those days, everything needed to follow the male line, were residents of one of the former territories. So whether it's Russia, Poland was under partition for 123 years, so whether it's Russia, Austria-Hungarian Empire, or Prussia, or Germany, as long as you can prove that they lived there as permanent residents, and when they immigrated, they did not naturalize before 1920, you have a case. And it's, it's very difficult to prove, and without your input would be very difficult, because what that also did, the census record that you found, it unlocked pathways to further research for our researchers in Poland. So essentially by, being very detailed and, as passionate about finding the records, we in the end got where we needed to get. And it would have been pretty emotional and kind of, because I know it took, it took many, many months. And, we kind of kept saying to you, yes, you qualify, but no, we haven't been able to find the records. What did that feel like? What was going through your head at the time?
I just felt like I wasn't going to give up. Like I was like, when I was told, like, well, you were telling me that you were having trouble finding records. I was like, okay, well, I'll pitch in as well. Maybe I'll find something, because I knew that my family was from there. But unfortunately, it's a war-torn part of the world where there has been, it got affected by both world wars, records were destroyed. And it was just a matter of being persistent and trying to be patient, which is not one of my attributes. Just, basically not taking no for an answer.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you've said sort of indirectly here is, and I wanted to emphasize that often people assume that there are no records in Poland or former territories. And, when we're talking about Ukraine of today or Belarus, people might be concerned that the records aren't there, but they in fact are. And you've already mentioned a couple of avenues which were online records. Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about that? Where did you search?
So I just Googled, I just looked up Jewish records online, and there were several different websites. One of them actually was the Mormon website. Another one was, it's called Galicia or I can't
Galicia, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, the amount of records that they have, I mean, I'm telling you, it's literally like maybe 1 million records.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. And you do have to be able to try to, squint your eyes and enlarge the screen, because a lot of it is not typewritten. It's in handwriting, which is often poor penmanship. But if you just keep pushing and pushing, then in my case, it worked out.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because yes, the records were handwritten, often in languages other than Polish, of course, because under partition, languages of administrations were Russian or German, and in fact, there was a period of time where you were not allowed to, speak Polish on the streets, if you were in the Russian or the Austro-Hungarian part of Poland. So to decipher those is actually quite challenging, because they're just scribbles, and some records are in Yiddish, some records are in Latin even. Like it's a really it's a mixed bag, and then to try and work out what they say and whether they actually about your family, because the other thing that often happens or happened when people immigrated is that their names got mangled, basically. So did your family change their name when they immigrated or not?
Not my paternal side, interestingly enough. My maternal side, yeah, we don't even know what that name was, because on the other side, my great-grandfather came from Poland, and when he landed in New York, he changed his name, and I did research on this, and in those days, you didn't have to file any paperwork with the state of New York to change your name. You just decided, okay, this is my new name.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And in fact, there was quite a bit of pressure to assimilate and to make the names more palatable. So people often change their surnames and their given names. So when we were looking for your family records, we tried a variety of spelling. Your surname is pretty unique, I guess, is the way to put it. But we tried double L, V instead of W. We tried all kinds of things, because when you search online, you have to be pretty precise. In the end, the records that you found have been extremely helpful, and they enabled us to pursue records with the archives, because the Polish government does not accept anything that's been found online. So we had to go and get copies of everything. And so when did you start feeling a bit more positive and a bit more energized as the journey progressed?
I think honestly, when I did find that record of my great-grandparents living together in that census of 1890, and I knew that was the sort of like the last nail in the coffin, like that was needed. I mean, you guys have been able to find his birth records. We were able to find the Ellis Island information, but we really needed to establish that my great-grandparents, number one, were married, and number two, that they were living where we said they were living. And when I found it, I knew that this was, like I said, like the smoking gun, like this is what we needed. And that was sort of a jump for joy moment for me.
Yeah. And Paul, did we ever explain to you why Jewish people didn't register their vital records through the civil avenues or not? Do you know why?
I think I was told that the reason was that there were two reasons. One, that it was expensive, and most Jewish people in that region didn't have money for food, let alone paying for a license. And two, in the eyes of Jewish people in those days, all that mattered is that you were married in the synagogue, in the eyes of God. Like that was all that mattered. Yeah. So they didn't care.
Yeah. But there was a third reason, and that is that they would have to pay higher taxes as a married couple. Under a couple of the jurisdictions in the area, they, so, as you said, in the eyes of the religion or God, they were married, but often these records were not registered through the civil channels, which, sometimes causes, as in your case, quite a few issues. Paul, what did you learn about your family going through this process?
Oh, goodness.
Or about yourself, or about you? because I've learned that you are very resilient, very patient, very, very polite, and very kind.
Thank you. Well, you know, when I got my Polish citizenship notification, like I said, I think it was last week, kind of lost track of time. It was sort of a surreal moment because it felt like full circle. And what I mean by that is, my great-grandparents, all of them left Europe around that time, around 1910. And Europe, the area of Europe they lived was terrible. I mean, it was really an awful place to live, especially for a Jew. It was just very discriminatory and you had no rights, I understood why they were leaving and why they came to America with the hope of promise of a future for their children. And, when I got my Polish citizenship reinstated, I guess you could call it, it felt like it was a big circle. Like I felt like my great-grandparents were welcoming me back to Europe.
Right.
And it's finally time to come back. It took 100 years, but now we're, doing it. And I do have plans on moving to Europe. So it's a real windfall for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that we've been able to facilitate it for you because for a lot of people, this journey starts as wanting a European passport, as you mentioned, but it does become something else as you go along, particularly if your case is a bit curly and a bit challenging. Because just reading through the records, reading between the lines, as I said earlier, you can learn so much more about your family's challenges and the historical background as well. You mentioned already poverty and, the fact that Europe wasn't a good place for people to stay. So by moving to America, it wasn't really a choice as such. They had to because, to survive, and often they had many kids. There was, just abject poverty in some situations. So it is kind of like an homage to your, I guess, to your ancestors that this privilege is given back to you. And I think it's certainly it's very meaningful to me, although I'm not you, so I hope it's also meaningful to you. But you did say that when you received the notification of being approved, that it was just like a massive relief, right? What happened?
Yeah, it was very emotional. I mean, it was a huge relief. After all the time, blood, sweat, and tears, energy, literally thousands of emails back and forth to your wonderful staff, Eva, researching, waiting, marking my calendar to follow up, and this went on for years. And, when it finally was approved, it was just completely overwhelming. And it still is. I just still can't believe it. It's surreal.
And you've got a t-shirt to prove it, right?
I do. I have my little shirt there that says Polska, which is, again,
amazing. Hey, listen, we have a few questions, Paul, for you. So let me just see what they are, if that's okay with you. Yeah.
Of course.
Let me just see. Okay. Just wondering if not naturalizing prior to 1920 is sufficient, or if it must be that they never naturalized at all. No, it is before 1920. So. Just by way of context, when the Polish state was re-established in 1918, it took the country 2 years to put in place laws to do with citizenship. And the legislators of the time not only provided avenue for people that were Polish to reclaim or claim their citizenship at the time, but they also provided avenues for the future generation. So that's why in Poland, until today, it doesn't matter where you're born. What does matter is that your ancestors were Polish themselves, so that you were born Polish, even though it was outside of Poland, if that makes sense. So Brenda, to answer your question more directly, it's the 1920, that's the cutoff. It is because that's when the laws were put into place, and we can provide you with a precise date. So that might, open an avenue for you. If you're interested, you can certainly talk to us. Paul, I also have a question for you about, somebody's asking about that leap of faith, that although you knew that you wanted European citizenship to invest, money and time, how did you make that decision to kind of go for it?
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, I did really research trying to find the right company to help me with this endeavor. And I could tell right from the beginning the professionalism of Polaron, and that the staff was very thorough and helpful. And so I chose Polaron. It was a very deliberate choice, and I figured it was worth trying, as opposed to, if it didn't work, then I knew I was still going to do it, but I was going to have to find another way. And I kind of thought this would be probably the easiest way for me to achieve European Union citizenship. So that's sort of why I did it.
Okay. And Paul, I hope you don't mind me asking you, but you do have children, and they also qualify, right, for citizenship now that you are a Polish citizen?
Yeah, we're currently working on both of their applications now. As a matter of fact, my sister and her two daughters will probably become Polaron clients as well, okay, because it's the same bloodline.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're all going to do it.
Okay. Well, they should be forever grateful to you for your persistence and hard work. And I think your life plans also, potentially include retiring in the EU. Not that you old, but is that on the cards? Like, are you hoping to eventually move and maybe stay longer, or what are your life plans?
Yes, actually, starting next year, thanks to the fact that I will soon have a European Union passport from Poland, I plan next year to live half of the year in Europe, and slowly but surely move it into more and more time until eventually, I think it'll be full-time.
Okay. And as far as the journey itself, what was the most challenging thing, apart from the fact that it took long and you couldn't find records? Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us? Because we were communicating across different time zones. So I'm in Melbourne, you in LA, our office is in Lodz in Poland. Was communication a challenge, or did you feel that for the most part we were updating you regularly and you got the right information at the right time?
No, I thought that I was thinking about this today, that it's so lucky that this is happening in this time, because we do have email, and it's, if it's 4 o'clock in the morning in Melbourne and it's whatever, it's noon in Poland or something like that. Yeah. You can always respond when it's an hour that's reasonable. And I just had to realize, okay, as a matter of fact, I kind of became really acquainted with the different time zones, and sort of it got ingrained in my brain, thinking like, well, I can't expect a response yet because it's 4 in the morning in Melbourne right now. Right. But the staff did respond very quickly and thoroughly and professionally, the whole process.
It's good to know. Now, I do have a pretty much last question for you, and that is about your view behind you. Is that a real view, or is it a screensaver?
It's not real. It's okay. A place that I plan on being, but no, it's not real.
So we don't need to feel jealous about where you are. That's okay. That's all right. All right. Well, look, I just wanted to really sincerely thank you for your time and giving us, kind of an honest appraisal of what happened and how things went. And, the journey ended in success, and we're very proud of you, of our staff, and very thankful for your cooperation, actually, because as I said earlier, and as you mentioned, it was teamwork. your case was particularly challenging because of the time that it lapsed, the lack of records. So we couldn't have done it without you. Couldn't have done it without us, I guess. So it's all a team effort. So I just sincerely wanted to thank you for all the input, your patience, and your perseverance as well.
Well, I can't tell you how thankful I am to you, Eva, your entire staff, Kinga, Ewelina, everyone at Polaron over the years has been so wonderful. And again, I feel completely lucky that I found Polaron, and I, without hesitation, would recommend anyone to consider using Polaron.
That's very lovely, and you've made our day. And as you mentioned, we only just started. It's nearly 9:30 a.m. and it's the afternoon. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And it's the middle of the night in Poland. So we will continue our day with a smile on our face, because it's been such a privilege, and you know, it gives us good energy, and it gives us hope for other clients who sometimes come to us with, you know, not even the names of the ancestors. So there's hope. Paul, thank you very, very much for your time and for your kind words. We really do appreciate them, sincerely.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.